Hello everyone! In our second short listening story episode, I and my partner Carla will tell you some elementary stories using simple grammar rules. If you haven't watched our first story episode, click the link on top. Moreover, if you want to test your English skills through stories and improve your vocabulary, click the link down below the video. Hello Carla! Have you made your story for our listeners?
Hello, Jeyhoon. This time, I only made one story for our listeners. Let's listen to your story first.
My first story is about a brutal king. Long years ago, there was a king ruling his kingdom with brutality and injustice. Every citizen in his kingdom hated him because they were scared of him, especially his actions. His soldiers and advisors hated him too. He killed many people who went against his will. He executed lots of people who disobeyed him. At that time, he applied some restrictions on people's life. He commanded his soldiers to supervise and arrest the people in town who didn't submit his will. People in town and other parts of the kingdom used to gather in hidden places and discuss his bad deeds. But the king knew the people gather every night somewhere and broke his command. He ordered his soldiers to find those men and arrest them in his dungeon. But soldiers were tired of his injustice. Even some of them refused to serve him. They ran away from the palace and went into the forest to build a shelter. One night, a man who was wearing a hood on his head came into the kingdom. He couldn't see anyone except for soldiers wandering around. He didn't show up himself to soldiers. He knew that he would be arrested too. He ran into the forest to spend the night till dawn. He piled up some logs around and built a fire to warm up. That night, there were some others in the forest. It was the king's soldiers who escaped from his injustice. The man was caught by two soldiers. He was brought to their leaders to be questioned. He said that he was a stranger and came here from another kingdom. He said that he could help them to get rid of the king's cruelties. Soldiers were listening to him very attentively and asking many questions. The man said that he and his people experienced the same problem in their kingdom many years ago. He stated that his people unified against the brutal regime that their king built. They became one and protested the regime and king's domination. Soldiers listened to his advice. They divided into groups and shared his teachings among others. Within a month, they increased in number and separated into other parts of the kingdom. At every corner of the kingdom, many people protested the king. One night, protesters stood in front of the palace where the king resided. They demanded the king to show up himself and leave his throne. The king felt afraid. He didn't want to give in. He ordered his soldiers to destroy people's crowd who protested him. But they didn't obey his command and joined the protesting soldiers and people. The king knew that it was his end. He knew that protesters would kill or execute him brutally, as he just did to them before. In the end, protesters went into the palace and captured the king. They executed him in his palace. After execution, they chose their new king, who was fair, kind, and honored. The new king ruled the kingdom with honor and dignity.
My story is about a physicist. There was a young man whose name is James. He was a very diligent and hard-working boy in his school. His teachers always appreciated his hard work at school. Sometimes, he could solve some difficult mathematical problems that his teachers couldn't. He was good at math, physics, and geometry. His teachers always encouraged him to become physicist or mathematician in the future. He was 16 years old when he entered the university. Many professors had admired his uniqueness in solving mathematical problems. He became very popular in the university, and his popularity spread other universities in the country. He wanted to be a great physicist of all time, like Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, and others. He knew that he had to work hard and let his mind work on gravity, relativity, and energy in physics. But in his country, there was no opportunity for him to develop his ideas on these hypotheses. He decided to go to the USA after he graduated from the university. In the USA, he met some physicists who could be helpful for him in the future. He gained lots of knowledge over the next years and used these to improve his vision related to law in physics. When he turned to 27, he had already been a professor who studied relativity of Einstein in space in details. He got married to an Indian woman who was his student. He had 2 children. When he turned to 30, many scientists invented new things in science based on his studies and researches related to physics. When he was 35 years, he returned to his home country. People in his country welcomed him with a great joy and enthusiasm as he made many contributions in science.
My next story is about how I learned English. In my country, the English language recently has become more popular among other languages. Having English skills helps us to find a job easily in my country, accessing more materials on the internet as well. Nearly 100,000 people learn English in my country, and only 10% of them every year go abroad to study. I was 19 years old when I started learning English. It was a very difficult time for me. At that time, I was poor, and I couldn't afford to enroll in an English course. So I decided to study English by myself. But I didn't know how and where to start learning it from. On the internet, I found many materials from beginner to advanced levels. I first downloaded some storybooks for elementary levels in English. I every day read around 10 or 15 pages. In the beginning, it was difficult for me to understand some sentence structures and unknown words. That time, I installed some translation programs on my laptop. When I didn't know the meaning of words and sentences during reading, I would go to these programs and solve my issue. But it wasn't enough for me. I needed to improve my listening, writing, and more importantly, speaking skills. On YouTube, I found some listening materials. I listened to many short English stories through animations. In the beginning, it was hard for me to catch some native speakers who spoke fast English. But it became easier and easier as I kept on practicing daily. I also developed my writing skills through stories and history. I love history and writing stories in my native language. I decided to write stories in English at that time. This method helped me a lot. But I had one big problem: speaking English. I had to find someone who could help me to develop it. On my social media accounts, I followed many English channels to meet people who speak English. My partner, Carla Flores, was one of them whom I found from English learning pages. She taught me how to speak English. She made lots of questions and topics every day for me to develop my speaking skills. She helped me to build correct sentence structures during speaking and writing. She taught me many valuable things in the process. Our relationship became stronger and stronger every day. It is now our 9 years that we are having a conversation about different topics every day and work on some projects together.